The moment Princess Leonor wedding changed Spain forever. Spain has watched royal weddings before. Grand balconies, church bells, crowds waving flags, history repeating itself in familiar colors. Everyone thought Princess Leonor's wedding would be the same image, the same script, the same carefully protected tradition. Then it didn't. Because the moment Princess Leonor said yes, Spain didn't just witness a marriage. Spain crossed a line it had been approaching for years, without fully realizing it. And what changed that day was not only the future queen's life, but the country's emotional relationship with its monarchy. This is the story of that moment, the one Spain is still trying to understand. Before the wedding, expectations were rigid. Leonor had been prepared her entire life to carry the weight of continuity. Every speech, every uniform, every public step framed her as duty before desire. The future queen was supposed to represent stability in a restless era. A symbol, not a disruption. Privately, however, tension had been building for years. Spain in 2025 was not the Spain of her grandparents. Trust in institutions was fragile. Younger generations questioned inherited power. Regional identities pushed louder. And right in the middle of this shifting ground stood a young woman raised to speak with measured calm, now stepping into adulthood under relentless scrutiny. People assume royal weddings are fairy tales. Inside the palace, they feel more like negotiations with history. Leonor's decision to marry when she did was the first surprise. Advisors worried about timing. Some feared distraction from her military training. Others quietly raised a harsher concern. Would Spaniards see this as softness in a time demanding firmness? The second surprise was who she chose. What mattered wasn't pedigree or nationality, but perception. For years, Leonor had been framed as distant by necessity. Her bond with someone seemed consistently beside her, not as a spectacle, but as a steady presence, rewrote that image overnight. Spain didn't see scandal. It saw recognition, something human. But the real rupture came not from the choice itself, it came from the way the wedding unfolded. This ceremony was elegant, yes, but intentionally restrained. No excessive grandeur, no theatrical dominance. That choice wasn't aesthetic, it was political without saying a word. When Leonor walked into the cathedral, the cameras caught something unexpected. Not nerves, not rehearsed composure, but a pause, a breath, a look toward her parents that wasn't scripted. Queen Letitia's eyes told a story Spain hadn't heard before. Pride mixed with release. As if one chapter of obligation had quietly closed, and another, more uncertain one had begun. King Felipe stood straighter than protocol required, not as a monarch, but as a father witnessing his daughter step into a choice that history could not fully control. That image traveled faster than any headline. And then came the vows. Leonor didn't dramatize them. She didn't romanticize monarchy. She spoke of responsibility, but differently than before. Not inherited responsibility, shared responsibility. Not a crown placed on one head, but a life entwined with another, publicly and permanently. For the first time, Spain heard its future queen speak as a woman forming a family in the open, not behind institutional language. That's when something shifted. Social media didn't explode with fashion analysis first. It exploded with reflection. Younger Spaniards didn't talk about tradition, they talked about relatability. Older generations didn't criticize form, they discussed legacy. The question changed that day. It stopped being, will she rule well? And became, will she rule differently? This is where tension quietly surfaced. Some political voices expressed unease. A queen who appears too human can destabilize an image built on permanence. Critics warned that emotional attachment could weaken authority. But the opposite happened. Leonor's wedding didn't soften the monarchy. It humanized it, and paradoxically, strengthened its relevance. Because later that evening, on the palace balcony, she didn't perform triumph. She listened. She stood beside her partner, not ahead, not behind. Equal footing. That alone carried more significance than any speech. Spain wasn't watching a fairy tale ending. It was watching a redefinition. Royal historians immediately compared the moment to pivotal shifts in European monarchies, not when power expanded, but when symbolism evolved. Leonor wasn't rejecting her role. She was reframing it, and that reframing unsettled those who depended on predictability. Inside the royal household that night, sources later described a calm unlike any before. No relief in having satisfied tradition. More like acceptance that tradition had been gently redirected. Queen Letizia reportedly stayed close to Leonor longer than protocol required. Not to advise, just to sit. Mothers everywhere recognized that silence. The next morning, international headlines spoke about romance. Spain spoke about identity. Editorials asked if this marked the end of emotional distance between crown and people. Others questioned whether intimacy could endure pressure. What no one questioned was this: Leonor had crossed from symbol to leader. And she had done it without a crown touching her head. Weeks later, public appearances felt different. When Leonor addressed crowds, applause rose faster. Faces in the audience weren't just respectful, they were attentive, curious, invested. The monarchy hadn't changed structure. It had changed tone, and that tone echoed far beyond palace walls. Students discussed her in classrooms. Families debated her meaning over dinner. Even critics acknowledged one thing: Spain now felt personally connected to its future queen. That connection is powerful, and dangerous, because when a country feels close to its monarch, expectations multiply. Leonor understands this. In private conversations later referenced by media, she reportedly said the wedding didn't free her from duty, it sharpened it. Love didn't replace obligation, it clarified it. That is why this moment mattered. Not because Spain saw a royal bride, but because Spain saw a future queen choose transparency over mystery, partnership over isolation, and emotional honesty over ceremonial distance. History will argue whether this strengthened the institution long-term. But culturally, emotionally, socially, Spain crossed into a new relationship with its monarchy on that day. And it can't go back. The bells stopped ringing. The crowds went home. The dresses were archived. But something irreversible remained. A future queen who reminded a nation that continuity does not require coldness, and that stability can coexist with sincerity. That is the moment Princess Leonor's wedding changed Spain forever.